الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Inshallah ta'ala we'll go through Kitab al-Siyam, the book of fasting, from the book of Akhsar al-Mukhtasarat. And we'll talk very briefly about the book and about how we will do it, inshallah ta'ala. First of all, this is in Arabic. Until the file pulls up, it's going to be in Arabic only. So I would extremely recommend you, inshallah ta'ala, to take it serious, that you would write notes. And it's intentional to be in Arabic so that I would read it word by word and translate it so that we can understand and take notes and take it with us, inshallah ta'ala, so that it's benefiting instead of just a general talk about the subject. And this is a matn, this is a precise book of fiqh. It's mukhtasar of a mukhtasar, so it's a very summarized version of another book by the same author, which is Al-Imam Muhammad ibn Badruddin ibn Balban rahimahullah, died in the year 1083 after the hijrah of the Prophet ﷺ. He's upon the Hanbali madhab, and this is one of the books that is authentic in the madhab of Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal rahimahullah. Some of the masail, or many of the masail of the subject, there's definitely differences of opinions. There is also contemporary scholars where they have their own opinions based on matters of al-ijtihad. We might mention it so that we don't have any confusion, but the most important thing is that we study what is mentioned, so to understand, to perceive these matters of fasting and rulings of fasting, so that it takes us to another level. Originally, this is supposed to be in Arabic, but recognizing the situation that we're in, we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bless it for all of us, and each one of us should benefit. So you don't have to know any Arabic whatsoever to benefit, inshallah ta'ala. We'll go through it, but I want you to look at the text, if it's not yet, or if you have it, you can download it. Maybe the link can be sent, but to look at it word by word and then write your own notes in English, inshallah ta'ala. It's very precise, it's very easy, it's very simple, inshallah ta'ala. Some of the masail, some of the issues might be strange to you. Because of the barakah, the blessings of the book, we won't skip any of these masail. And the ulama, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala have mercy on them, they did not leave anything. And this is like a book of law. So some situations might not be related to people here, for example, in this part of the world or at this time of age, but it's okay. It's part of preserving the Sharia and the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is universal, that fits any place at any times. So even if it doesn't relate to you, there are benefits, inshallah ta'ala, and fawaid, and it's all extracted from the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet alayhi salatu wassalam. It will be, inshallah ta'ala, brief, and let's just get to it, inshallah ta'ala, and hopefully things will get easy, inshallah ta'ala, after we get into the masail, inshallah. So the first thing is Kitab al-Siyam. We don't have it yet, right? Kitab al-Siyam. So the chapter, it's part of the book. The book is very precise, by the way, and it does not include all of the issues of fasting. Of course, we're approaching the month of Ramadan. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that we all witness the month of Ramadan, and this is part of preparing ourselves, not just to know the rulings, but it prepares ourselves following the ways of as-Salaf al-Salih, the early generations of Islam. At this time of the year, in Sha'ban, before that, they would revive or review the ahkam and the rulings of fasting in the masajid, in the houses of Allah, preparing oneself for the month of Ramadan. So we're following the same way, and we need to keep on following their ways for the blessings of making sure that we are following the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And when it comes to matters of that soften the hearts, matters of the month of Ramadan, that we need to establish it in the way that is pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this is definitely something also that we need to work on ourselves to receive some admonitions, reminders, all kinds of things for the blessings of the month of Ramadan and the virtue of it. This is a subject that definitely needs to be explained in many sessions, But because of, again, the precise session here, we're talking about only matters of fiqh. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to accept from each and every one of us and to soften our hearts for the deen of Allah, to be upon what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants from us. And the more you learn with ilm, the more you hold firm to this haqq, to this truth, the more that you would see there is no like of it whatsoever in this entire earth. There's no like of the deen of Allah, there's no like of the Quran, there's no like of the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. These ahkam also, there's no like of it. How perfect Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala preserved this deen, and how much work the people of knowledge they did to preserve the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We'll see how much we cover in this session. We have less than 45 minutes, and then we'll continue inshallah ta'ala tomorrow and after tomorrow by the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. First of all, I would advise myself and everyone to have sincerity, inshallah, to have al-ikhlas, which is a reminder that we should always be reminded of before we do anything, before any session, to sincerely seek rewards from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone, seeking the rewards from Allah in the hereafter, and the intention of increasing our knowledge to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ala bayyina, based on clear evidences, to seek the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone. The questions about madhab and this and that, inshallah ta'ala, we'll go through some of the masail, and maybe inshallah ta'ala briefly we'll try to explain. So the first mas'ala, or the first thing that is mentioned in the book, I would read it in Arabic if it's because of the time. I know that it's you guys, everybody's with me? طيب. So it's called Kitab al-Siyam. Kitab is the book, right? And this is basically the chapter of al-Siyam, and al-Siyam is basically the fasting. We won't go into the details of what does it mean linguistically and things like this, but it's basically the definition of a siyam is to withhold oneself from what breaks a siyam. Basically with the intention of doing so. And that's why we will learn inshallah ta'ala what breaks fasting and what constitutes fasting and from what time to what time and all types of things. So it's not just abstaining from food, but you do this as or food or drinks or the things that breaks the fast, but you do this as a ibadah, as a worship to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, according to what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ordered us. And in matters of ibadat, we do not put forward our like, our taste, our intellect. What is constituted upon us is to submit ourselves, but to understand exactly what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants from us. The first thing that he says, and I would read it, and hopefully inshallah ta'ala, if you have it, you can follow inshallah ta'ala, and then we will review it once we get the thing downloaded inshallah. It says, يَلْزَمُ كُلَّ مُسْلِمٍ مُكَلَّفٍ قَادِرٍ. Yalzam means, al-ilzam is when something is made mandatory. When something is mandatory. So fasting here is mandatory. We're talking about the fasting of the month of Ramadan. And whatever is mandatory as it will come. Sometimes fasting other than Ramadan is mandatory upon a person, like the kafarat, like the expiations and the like of this. So the word yalzam, that means it is mandatory. Kulla Muslim, every Muslim. So fasting is mandatory upon every Muslim, but with conditions. So every Muslim is mandatory for him to fast the month of Ramadan. No, with three conditions here. Mukallaf, every Muslim first, he has to be a Muslim. So for a non-Muslim, he has to be a Muslim to fast. Are the non-Muslims addressed by these ahkam and by these ibadat? The answer is yes. Are they going to be questioned about it in the Day of Judgment? The answer is yes. But as a condition for them to fulfill these ibadat, they have to embrace the deen of Islam first. So a person has to be a Muslim, and what is defined as Muslim, and then mukallaf. Mukallaf means that he is addressed by the rulings of the ahkam. He is in the age of a taklif. So the child, for example, is not responsible, so he is not addressed by fasting as an obligation. If a child fasts, it will be inshallah ta'ala accepted from him. He will be rewarded, the parents will be rewarded, but it's not an obligation, as we will see inshallah ta'ala. So the word mukallaf is the one that is addressed by the ibadat, which is basically has to be in the age of puberty, and he has to be sane. So the insane is not addressed by anything because he's not responsible for his actions. So this is al-mukallaf. So Muslim, mukallaf, qadir. What if a person is not able to fast, being sick, or have excuses that is mentioned clearly in the laws of the Sharia? Then the third condition here is that he has to be qadir. Qadir from al-qudra, power, the ability. So the person has the ability to fast, has to have the ability to fast, and also we'll talk about what if a person doesn't have the ability to fast. So Muslim, mukallaf, qadir. Three things. Muslim, and he's mukallaf, he's responsible for the actions, reach the age of puberty, he's not insane, he is sane, and he is qadir, that means he is able to fast. He has the ability to fast, and also that requires some details, but this is in brief the three conditions for the fasting to be an obligation. There's difference between, and you can make a note of this, there's difference between conditions for the obligation of fasting, and there are conditions for the validity of fasting. Right? There's difference between obligation and validity. A child can fast, and the fasting will be valid for him, but it's not an obligation. Right? So there's difference between conditions that is for the obligation of fasting, and these are the three conditions for the obligation of fasting. Muslim, mukallaf, again, and qadir, have the ability to fast. When do we fast the month of Ramadan? How do we know that the month of Ramadan started? This is the next subject. He says, بِرُؤْيَةِ الْهِلَالِ بِرُؤْيَةِ, by ru'yat. Ru'ya is ra'a, which means by seeing with the naked eyes, al-hilal, or the crescent, or the moon. Inshallah, we have some light, mashallah. So page number 143, I think 143. So بِرُؤْيَةِ الْهِلَالِ. Al-hilal refers to the moon, but it's more specific, the crescent, when the moon is first born. Again, this is what is meant. I'm going to repeat this over and over again. If you have any questions, inshallah, maybe some other time, because it's meant to be very summarized version of things. We're not going into all of the details. So, بِرُؤْيَةِ الْهِلَالِ, this is what makes the month of Ramadan, how the month of Ramadan starts, by seeing al-hilal. And ru'yat al-hilal, every word counts in matters of fiqh. The ulama, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala have mercy on them, they did not use loose words like this. This is like a book of law. So therefore, any calculations, it is not valid to be taken as to know when the month of Ramadan will start. This is consensus among the ulama of the ummah, that because of the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, very straightforward, very clear, صوموا لرؤيته وأفطروا لرؤيته. Fast لرؤيته, when you see it, and break your fast when you see it, meaning the moon. And even the Prophet ﷺ did not leave any room for misunderstanding when he said نحن أمة أمية لا نكتب ولا نحسب الشهر هكذا وهكذا. The Prophet ﷺ, he said, we are illiterate ummah, illiterate nation. We do not write, we do not count. The month is like this, 3 times 30, and like this, 3 times and 29, that means. So it's either 29 or 30. And very briefly again, and it's mentioned many times before, we are illiterate ummah. This is in the context of praising this ummah. Person will say, but we all now know how to read and write. It's about this ummah is always going to be like this till the day of judgment. Meaning that this ummah of the Prophet ﷺ doesn't need sophistications, doesn't need calculations to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, doesn't need any of this. If you are in the jungle somewhere or in the desert or you're a PhD in whatever, you'll be able all to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala at equal levels. So the religion is very easy and simple. So if you see the hilal, the moon, you fast. If you don't see it, then you don't fast. As simple as that. And this is basically what the Prophet ﷺ, he said. So رؤية الهلال, he says ولو من عدل, ولو من عدل. Right, you see here, this is 1, 2, 3, 4. The line that next to it is number 1. برؤية الهلال ولو من عدل. Even if the hilal is seen by one عدل. عدل, if you heard that word before, إن الله يأمر بالعدل, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commands us to be upon justice. And what refers to here is an individual that is given that characteristics of being adl. So a Muslim, there is just. Basically it means a Muslim there is upright, there is righteous, there is not known to be openly committing sins. So he's not basically a fasiq or a openly committing sin. So someone to be known as a decent or a good person. So the citing of one person is sufficient. One person is sufficient, and that is for the hilal, for the month of Ramadan to start. So this is the first way we got to know the month of Ramadan starts. And as you see here, this version has some numbering for us to make it easy for us to see the masail, inshallah ta'ala. So by seeing the hilal, and the most important thing is that you understand every word that is up there. As far as the masail and what comes into your mind, not yet, inshallah ta'ala. And the fatawa and rulings and different things. So make sure that you follow that, inshallah ta'ala. You'll see the benefit of it at the end, inshallah. So برؤية الهلال, by seeing the hilal, ولو من عدل, even if it's one person that is adl, upright. And the Prophet ﷺ at his time, he took the witness of one person, as the hadith of Abdullah ibn Umar radiallahu anhu, from an Arabi, from a Bedouin. He saw the hilal, and the entire ummah, they started the month of Ramadan by the witness of one person. And this is how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made it easy. A person would say, well, what if people made a mistake? So what? It's not a mistake. If people started the month of Ramadan wrong, because someone said he saw the hilal when he didn't, and people started the month of Ramadan, they did not make a mistake, because they followed the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What if at the end of the month, they saw the hilal in the night of the 29th? That means they only fasted 28 days, and the month is either 29 or 30, because they made a mistake in the first part of the month, right? They did not make a mistake, and this is okay. They just have to break their fast, and the next day is Eid, and they make up a day. This is how it is. This is not a mistake. This is not a disaster. This is not what people say, oh, see, this country or that country, they just made a mistake in the month of Ramadan, and that's why we have to do the calculations. We have to go fly a plane and look for the moon. All of this is not needed. It is not just about being simple, or if it's correct to say this is deen. So, and it happened at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, at the time of Umar radiallahu anhu, and everything was fine. Nobody called it a mistake or anything of that nature. So anyway, so the first thing is the witness of one person, or بإكمال شعبان. When Sha'ban is completed. Ikmal, that means you completed the month of Sha'ban 30 days. So because the month cannot be 31 days. So it's only 30 days. So if Sha'ban is 30, then the next day, by default, like that is the month, it is the beginning of the month of Ramadan. So there's no need for people to look for the hilal, for the moon, in the night of the 31st, because there's no 31st. So if it's 30 days, that means the next day is the Ramadan. Clear? And the third one, as it says, أو وجود مانع من رؤيته ليلة الثلاثين منه كغيم وجبل وغيرهما. The third thing is, which has some differences of opinions, here if there's a mana, a wujud. Wujud is the presence of something. So aw means or. So wujud, the presence of mana'. Mana' means a barrier, something that prevents a person from doing something. Al-mawani' is the plural, right? So wujudi mana', something that is preventing, or a barrier that people are not able to see. Mani' min ru'yatihi, from seeing it. The ha here refers to the moon. So there's a barrier from seeing the moon. Laylat al-thalathina minhu, the night of the 30th. We know that the night comes before the day. When do we see the moon? When do we go try to see the moon for the next day? Is the night of the 30. Because we already finished 29 days, so now the month either going to be 30, either going to be 29 or 30. So people look after they finish the day of the 29th, after sunset or at sunset, they would look for the moon. So the next day, either going to be 30 of Sha'ban or the beginning of Ramadan. What if they're not able to see it? There's two situations here, right? Either it's clear skies and there's no moon to be sighted, so that means what? The next day is what? The 30th of Sha'ban, right? So after the 29th, everybody try to see the moon, and it's no clouds in the skies and everything is clear, but nobody saw anything. So the next day is the 30th of Sha'ban, and there's no situations here. This is perfect. And then the next day is the month of Ramadan, then after 30th of Sha'ban. But here this mas'ala, if there was something that prevented the people from looking or seeking the citation of the moon, how is that? كَغَيْمٍ, it's cloud. غَيْم is the cloud. وَجَبَل, or a mountain. Inshallah, here there's some mountains, but it's not maybe very high. So if there's a mountain that is preventing people from seeing a part of the skies, for example, right? What to do then in this case? This has difference of opinions. According to the madhab here, if that happens, the next day is the beginning of Ramadan. This is according to madhab Ahmad, rahimahullah, ihtiyatan. They do that to make sure that they're on the safe side. You see the difference between the sky is clear and nobody saw the moon, then the next day for sure, no doubt about this, it's the 30th of Sha'ban. But if they're not able to see it because of cloud or because of something, smoke, things are not very clear, then the next day, according to the madhab, is the beginning of Ramadan. People have to fast the next day. There's another riwayah in the madhab that it's the 30th of Sha'ban, and this is what is basically the opinion of many of the ulama and even the contemporary ones. So, but take this as a mas'ala. This is a mas'ala here. So if with these matters, of course, you follow whatever country that you are from, and whenever the ulama, they will make a verdict in this matter. So if they didn't see it, whether it's because of a cloud or not, then the next day is the 30th of Sha'ban. According to the madhab, and there's another narration opposite to this, is that the next day becomes the month of Ramadan. By the way, there are some number of companions of the Prophet ﷺ were upon this, and it's a detailed subject with the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. فَإِنْ غُمَّ عَلَيْكُمْ, if it's cloudy, فَقْدُرُوا لَهُ. And قُدُرُوا لَهُ, the ulama differences of how to explain it, whether to count that this is the 30th of Sha'ban or make it tight. اقدروا, that means ضيقوا, that means make it tight, that means make the month of Sha'ban 29 then, and then the next day is Ramadan. So this is a valid differences of opinions. It's not ground for people to fight with one another. The beginning of the month of Ramadan, the end of the month of Ramadan is when people are fasting and when people are having Eid. So they would declare it and people follow without any disputes, without any problems, inshallah ta'ala. So I hope that this is clear so far. So now we talked about the three conditions of the people, those who would fast, and the three ways to see that the next day is Ramadan. Seeing the moon from one righteous person, or the month of Sha'ban is completed 30 days, or you're not able to see it because of a cloud, then the next day is Ramadan. And with the other opinion also is a valid one. The next one, it says, وَإِن رُؤِيَ نَهَارًا فَهُوَ لِلْمُقْبِلَةِ. وَإِن, in is a conditional statement. وَإِن, if, and if, رُؤْيَ. رُؤْيَ here, referring to the moon, and this is in the passive tense, like the ru'ya. In ru'ya, if it was seen, meaning if the crescent, if the moon is seen naharan during the day, someone saw the moon during the day, at dhuhr time, then فَهُوَ لِلْمُقْبِلَةِ. Then it's for the coming one. So it's for the next day. So this is with regards to the fasting, or regarding with the beginning of the month of Ramadan. The next point here, it says وَإِنْ صَارَ أَهْلًا لِوُجُوبِهِ فِي أَثْنَائِهِ أَوْ قَدِمَ مُسَافِرٌ مُفْطِرًا أَوْ طَهُرَتْ حَائِضٌ أَمْسَكُوا وَقَضَوْا. Now this is another mas'ala, and as you see, the met is different than if we explain about the fasting of month of Ramadan in the general terms, be more organized than this. We'll talk about the virtue of Ramadan, the virtue of fasting, what are the pillars of fasting, what are the conditions of fasting, what breaks the fast, this and that, and then the matter become easy and simple, but we're not taking it this route. So we're going like this first, and then at the end, inshallah ta'ala, maybe we can organize it in a different way. He says here, وَإِنْ صَارَ أَهْلًا لِوُجُوبِهِ فِي أَثْنَائِهِ. In صار, a conditional statement. If صار, that means it happened, or a person became أهلا. أهلا is not أهلا وسهلا. It's not like welcome, how are you? أهلا means, and it's not the word that is used for family. أهلا means he is now fit to something. You are أهل to this. The people, for example, of the Muslim community here in San Diego are أهل to organize this conference. So that means it befits them to organize something like this, right? So وَإِنْ صَارَ أَهْلًا لِوُجُوبِ. Who is the one, if a human being become fit for the obligation of fasting to be upon him during the day of Ramadan. Okay? So the mas'ala here, someone became a Muslim during the day of Ramadan. في أثنائه. أثناء الشيء, that means you have two things and it's in the middle of something. So someone became a Muslim during the day of Ramadan. Any day of Ramadan. Someone, as he says here, some of the examples. أو قدم مسافر مفطرا. A traveling person, as we will know, a traveling person, he doesn't have to fast. So he returned back home. He was musafir, he was traveling, so he was not fasting. And he returned home during the day of Ramadan. Does that person has to stop eating and drinking till Maghrib, or he is already broke his fast, so can he continue to be muftir or breaking his fast? أو طهرت حائض, or a woman in her haid and her menses, she was purified, she was pure in the middle of the day of Ramadan. What is the ruling here that is mentioned in the book? أمسكوا. أمسكوا means they withhold. The ruling for them is that they stop eating and drinking. First of all, understand the situation here. Someone became a Muslim at Dhuhr time in the days of Ramadan. According to this is, we will tell that brother, after he said the Shahada, brother, no food and drink for you till Maghrib time. Right? And you have to make up that day afterwards. That's according to this. Or a person was traveling and he was not fasting, he returned home, then no eating and drinking. This day does not count because he started the Fajr while not being fasting. Right? أو قدم مسافر مفطرا. أو طهرت حائض, or a sister, she was in her menses, that means it's permissible, she has to, it's mandatory for her to break her fast, but she was clean at the time of Dhuhr, for example. Then she is not to eat anything till Maghrib. And then they have to make up the day, وَقَضَوْا, and they have to make this day, of course. This is one opinion clearly like this. The other opinion is they can continue to break their fast because they already broke their fast. But why the ulama here, according to the opinion, says أمسكوا? Not because of anything about fasting, it's about حرمة Ramadan. It's about the sanctuary of Ramadan. The day of Ramadan is a sacred thing. So now the reason for you to break your fast is gone. So that means you go back to your original state, which is that you're fasting. Right? But if someone continues to eat, this is a valid opinion. And this is also another narration in the madhab, and this is where the ulama like Sheikh and others were upon that. So if you're traveling and you came home and you already broke your fast, there's no point of withholding or stop eating and drinking. You can continue to eat and drink. You're going to make up the day anyway. But if you abstain, it's better for you to be away from the differences of opinions and to observe the importance of Ramadan. And also there's another thing is of openly eating and drinking in front of the Muslims and things like this. Well, this is something to be avoided, even if you have the excuse, so that you don't break that exaltation of the orders of Allah, especially if you're among Muslims and things of that nature. And there are many other situations here. So this is a clear mas'ala if you understand what is meant here. وَإِنْ صَارَ أَهْلًا. If I read it again in Arabic, would you understand the words? وَإِنْ صَارَ, and if Sara, it happened that he became أهلا لوجوبه, that he befits him to receive the obligation في أثنائه, during it, أو قدم musafirun, muftiran, or a musafir, or a traveler, he came back while he is muftir, while he's in state of breaking his fast. Or ha'id is the woman in her menses, tahurat, from purification. Amsaku. Amsaku is when you hold something. Here when you withhold from eating and drinking. Waqadaw, and they make up that day. Then he says afterwards, inshallah 10 minutes we'll finish inshallah ta'ala. وَمَنْ أَفْطَرَ لِكِبَرٍ أَوْ مَرَضٍ لا يرجى برؤه أطعم لكل يوم مسكينا. ومن أفطر لكبر أو مرض. ومن refers to al-aqil, refers to a living person. So, and man, whoever aftar, that means he broke his fast. لكبر. Lam here, لكبر, this lam al-ta'lil. He broke his fast because he is kibar, because he's old in age. So being old in age, very old in age, that by itself is a sufficient reason for someone to break his fast. He's not having a specific sickness, but he's extremely old that he's weak. He cannot fast because the weakness of being old in age. لِكِبَرٍ أو or marad, or sickness, a disease. لا يرجى برؤه. La is negating letter. Yurja from al-raja, there's no hope. There's no hope. Bur'uhu, there's no hope for him to be cured. If a person is very old in age, there's no hope for him to return back to be shabab or to be youth anymore, right? And the same thing when a person is, there's some diseases where it's, not temporary ones, but it's a continuous one. So there's no hope for the person to be cured. Everything is by the will of Allah. But this is according to what people know. There's no hope for him to be cured. What happens in that case? أطعم لكل يوم مسكينا. He would feed أطعم from الطعام. He would feed لكل يوم for every day مسكينا, a poor person. So this is a specific mas'ala. Someone that broke his fast, not for just any sickness that hopefully inshallah ta'ala he will be cured, but something that is permanent, and someone that is very old in age. So he would feed for every day a miskin. When does he feed the miskin? Can a person feed the miskin for every day from the beginning of the month or before the month of Ramadan starts? The answer is no, because the situation didn't happen yet. Even though he's very old or he is sick, he has to wait till the month of Ramadan starts. So at the end of the month of Ramadan, he can give for the 30 days the food for the miskin. And by the way, a little bit details in this. When a person would feed a poor for every day, the poor should own the food that you give him. So when people say you fix food and you feed the poor, there's a difference between feeding poor some food and giving poor person food as an ownership. So that's why if you give him grains, something that can be saved, this is definitely what's been avoiding all the differences of opinions. And it's nisfu sa', which is basically like one handful of food. So the point here is not about the amount, but it's is about giving ownership of the food to the poor. Because when you fix food to someone, it doesn't necessarily mean that he owns the food. You're just inviting him to eat and then he gets full and he leaves. What if he's not full? And that's why it's either cooked or it's something that can be saved. But for every day, there is going to be food for the miskin, for the poor person. There's some details in this, but this is what we're trying to take the matni here first, and then later on, if we have time, we'll go to some of these details, inshallah ta'ala. So this is one of the categories of people, those who would break their fast. There's no sin on them because of a permanent sickness or because old in age. Then they would feed for every day a poor person. The last mas'ala for tonight, inshallah ta'ala, so that we don't keep you for long because of the other lectures, inshallah ta'ala. He says, وَسُنَّ الْفِطْرُ لِمَرِيضٍ يَشُقُّ عَلَيْهِ وَمُسَافِرٌ يَقْصُرُ. وَسُنَّ الْفِطْرُ. Sunnah with the noon, not a ta' marbuta at the end. Not sunnah. Not sunnah. Sunnah is the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. But here, this is with a noon at the end. That means it's recommended. And the sunnah, the word sunnah, when it's mentioned in the books of fiqh, it refers to what is recommended. So not always sunnah means recommended. It depends on what the context of the sentence is. If it's in the books of fiqh, it refers to what is recommended. So what is recommended here? Al-fitr, to break your fast. Limarid, for a sick person. Yashukku alayhi. That means it's difficult, it's tough for him. Al-mashaqqa is difficulty, it's hardship. So you have two things, not just al-mashaqqa. If a person is going through some difficulty, but he's not sick, it depends on the level of difficulty, right? But here it talks about لِمَرِيضٍ يَشُقُّ عَلَيْهِ. Someone is sick, and not any sickness, the sickness that makes it tough for him to fast, or fast will be harmful for him, according to what a Muslim doctor would testify for that. So then it's recommended for the sick person to break his fast. It's recommended. If it's going to harm him, if it's difficult for him. What if he fasted? The fasting is valid. If someone is doing something, even if it's wrong for him to fast, but if he fasts, the fast is valid. But it's recommended for him not to fast. And also he says, وَمُسَافِرٌ يَقْصُرُ. A traveling person, it's recommended for him to break his fast because of the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. لَيْسَ مِنَ الْبِرِّ الصِّيَامُ فِي السَّفَرِ. It is not out of righteousness to break your fast when you're traveling. Meaning, do not think that you will have more rewards if you fast while traveling. And what actually makes it easy for us to understand is whatever is easier for the person, then this is what is closer to the sunnah. So if a person is traveling and it's easier for him to fast because everybody's fasting and it's easy to fast because he has to make up the day, of course. So it's easier for him to fast than to make up the day afterwards. Then it's from the sunnah to continue to fast. But if he breaks his fast, because it makes the traveling for him easier, if it makes the traveling for him easier, then it's recommended for him to break his fast. Clear? And even if you're traveling going for Umrah, right? You cannot go for Hajj in Ramadan. The month of Hajj starts in Shawwal, right? But if someone is going for Umrah in Ramadan, and the plane is air conditioned, mashallah, and you're going against the sun, so the day is short. But if you want to break your fast, you are free to do so. And whoever looked down upon a Muslim because he breaks his fast because he's traveling, this is a shameful thing or an ignorant matter, because a person doesn't have to be sick or anything. He can be young or old. There's nothing wrong with that whatsoever, because this is what happened at the time of the Prophet ﷺ. And even in some situations, as the Prophet ﷺ, he said, ذهب المفطرون اليوم بالأجر أو كما قال عليه الصلاة والسلام. When they were traveling and they were so tired, then some people were fasting and some people were not fasting. And no one was condemning the other. Everybody was fine with one another. But then when they stopped to rest, those who were not fasting, they took all of the burden of the work. They set the place for them to sit, and they cooked the food and prepared everything. So the Prophet and the fasting ones, because it was very hot, as the narrator of the hadith, he says it was too hot, that they would put their hands on their heads, and you can understand what it means when it's too hot over there. And when they came down from traveling, the fasting ones, they fell on the ground because of the extreme tiredness. And when the ones that did not fast, they prepared everything, the Prophet ﷺ afterwards, he said, those who broke their fast, they surpassed everyone with the ajr, with the reward today. So those who are not fasting, they get more rewards than those who are fasting. So the fiqh, the understanding, the ilm, right? This is something that is important with this. So to make it easy to understand, if a person is traveling, what makes it easier for the person for traveling, this is what is according to the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. Not necessarily to break the fast, or not necessarily to fast. We'll stop here inshallah ta'ala because of the time, and hopefully inshallah ta'ala we'll continue tomorrow. And if there's any questions, we'll keep it inshallah ta'ala for the next time inshallah ta'ala to meet. And if you have the file, this chapter, read it over inshallah ta'ala. Try to go word by word to understand what it means, and we'll go on from there inshallah ta'ala. Barakallahu feekum. وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على محمد وصحبه وسلم. والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله.